This is Progress Culture.
Progress Culture is a weekly happening where master drummer Paul F. Murphy and I share live improvised music and impromptu conversations with people from various fields and expertises about community, value, art, science, freedom, and progress for all. We are excited to share it all with you, so have a listen and see what's going on this week on Progress Culture. Now, let's get into the show. But first, let's hear some music.
Hello, everybody. This is Dominic Fragman and Paul Murphy from Sonic Spirits, which includes poet Jere Carroll, and we are here today in the TechPort hangar to do the progress culture thing, and we are excited that you are here, and we are excited to have some friends with us. Mr. Brian Jordan of Jordan R&D, always a pleasure.
Yeah, always good to be here.
I feel like that's probably, you guys probably think that's like written somewhere, but it's just... And it's awesome to have here Mr. Rob Winston, who is the president and founder of Hopflight, which is in the process of making flying vehicles.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
It's awesome to have you here.
Great.
We had a parking lot conversation one day. Brian and I were standing in the parking lot out front talking about how difficult it was to know anything. And why, the uniqueness of every moment and every person should be treated as it is right there without any assumptions or preconceptions or think that you know or whatever. And Rob comes over and he says something to the effect, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I doubtless that you'll correct me. But you said something like, you quoted somebody who I can't remember, and you said, "I can know nothing from experience."
That's right. Yes. And that was Edmund Deming, the person that really started intensively studying the process of how to do things efficiently and how to expand your knowledge within yourself. And he said a little tongue-in-cheek that that you learn nothing from experience, because what happens with experience, it puts you in a box, right? If all you know is, say, woodworking, when you try to go metalworking, you might use the same sort of tools. You need to think outside your box and do things differently. So that was what he was saying, and that's part of the problem he had with helping companies. He started in America post-World War II and was sent to Japan to help them help make their processes better, working with Toyota, Mitsubishi, a lot of the big companies, helping them to think differently, how to do things, how to do processes better. And we all know the story that through the 60s and 70s, the foreign cars that used to have derogatory names to them because they didn't last, now we're outlasting the American vehicles. And a lot of it's contributed to is teaching the people different ways of thinking.
Interesting. Yeah. And you say that was a reference to I don't remember exactly how you just said it, but from within yourself.
Yes, that's right.
Tell me more about that. Is that something that you use when you're making flying cars?
Yeah, that's
man.
right.
Like that's crazy. I mean, is this something was that a vision that came from within yourself, or how does a process like that go? I know there's a lot of people that probably tell you in the beginning that would never happen.
That's
like
right.
That. Yeah.
People still to this day, they don't believe it'll ever happen and take place. And I often use that analogy about that experience teaches you nothing, because you always need to test yourself. You don't want to be that guy that, hey, let's try something different. What do they say? But we've always done it this way. I'm sure everybody's heard that. We've always done it this way. Why do we want to do something different? Because that puts you in that box of your experience. So I test myself to make sure I'm not keeping myself in the box. And there's ways to do that, and we can expand on that a little bit about, hey, so you try to look at things differently. Try to look at them in extremes. Like, hey, if this was really small, if this was really big, if it was underwater, if it was in outer space, how would I do this? If I had 10 hands, how would I do this? If I could hook my brain to this machine, what could I do differently? And it helps to break that down. And kind of in the process of developing the vehicle that we're doing, we have a lot of people ask me, well, a lot of people are trying to do this. What's your differentiator? Well, we are the only vehicle that uses wingborne lift for hover. We're the only vehicle that flies like a bird. And so to try to think about things differently, that's one way. You look at nature, right? How does nature do things? We've gotten rid of all standard airplanes have control surfaces.
Right.
We have no control surfaces. We got rid of all your standard control surfaces because, like a bird, it uses its whole wing for lift and thrust, and that's what we do. We vary the lift and thrust on the wings of the bird, doing things similar like that.
What does that mean, control surfaces?
So a standard control surface on an airplane are the ailerons. So like when you're turning, one goes up, one goes down to deflect the air, and the rudder in the back that changes your yaw, and the elevator changes your pitch. You notice a bird, they don't have that. They just do it naturally in changing their wing shape and deflecting thrust and lift. So that's one of the inspirations that we did. And as far as I know, we have the only vehicle that can take off vertically, move forward and fly and land again without using the standard control surfaces that other people have with that also.
And coming from aviation, that's pretty radical. That is very radical.
Right.
And coming from Rob Winston, that's certainly different. Now, getting back to thinking, I know one of the things we talked about when we were outside in the parking lot, we talked about brainstorming and how brainstorming is kind of a legacy way of thinking. And having an R&D firm, I'm always trying to think outside of the box and looking for ways. I'm always thinking, what am I missing? What am I not thinking about? And if there are creative ways of helping me, get pushed through that, what are some of the exercises you do?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that, because I like to think creatively, not only on product design, but also what's the creative process to have a creative process, right?
Right.
So I think about that because everybody has got these great ideas. They may not be able to articulate it, or they might be stuck in their experience like we talked about, and things like that. So how do you help tease those things out with people? And brainstorming itself is a good session, but normally what they do, they bring everybody to the room and say, like the Apollo 13 thing. Boom, here's the parts, here's what we got. All right, let's go to it. So what happens in a scenario like that is you get strong leaders and you get the followers and things like that. And you kind of end up with a solution that's going to be based on the set of people. So how do you tease out solutions from other people that might be more quiet? They don't want to push their idea, a little bit shy and stuff like that. So what I like to do is I like to, say you have a group of 4 or 5 people and sit down with them individually and describe the process and talk about those things. Like I said, looking at them in extremes, looking at them, hey, if you had all the money in the world, think about things like that. You had all the money and the manpower in the world, how would you solve this problem? If it was science fiction, how would you solve this problem? And you work with the people to help break them out of the way they're thinking and give them a chance to figure something out on their own, okay? So you let them work with things on their own and come with some ideas. So everybody that gets to do that and come with their ideas to the brainstorming session. Now you give them a chance, everybody to, and in a brainstorming session, no idea is too outrageous.
That's right.
Because you can oftentimes pivot off an outrageous idea to come to a practical idea, right? Mm-hmm. So, and have all those people briefed the ideas they thought about themselves. And almost without exception, you will find that doing it that way, you take individual thought, you combine it with group thought, and you come out with a better idea than you could have with an individual or with starting with a group. So they go in there, they talk about their ideas, they defend their ideas, then you branch and sequel off those ideas and brainstorm some more.
Right. So that's pretty slick. Yeah, we've kind of used some of those tactics after we talked that day. We have a couple interns and we have some people, outside of Maryland that work with us, and we've been using that very tool. Mm-hmm. We kind of go out and we say, hey, look, think of this, and let's meet back in 2 weeks, and everybody come back and like you said, you'd be amazed at what kind of ideas you come up with. And I was like, wow, I never would have thought of that. And me personally, my experiences are terrible. So I certainly put myself in a box all the time, and that's why I really rely on some of these, other people to kind of help me out with these things. I always tell my wife, man, if I just had some people to kind of bounce stuff off of, really expand on those ideas. So it's an incredible guy here.
Yeah, this is. I mean, when we were talking in the parking lot that day, I was like, yes, we have to have Rob on the show. That's cool. So, do you make it? So you guys, when you're doing these things, you create scenarios, or not create scenarios, rather, where do you just relinquish everything, all the parameters, all the rules?
Me personally,
Like, do you spend time going, okay, well, if I think about this, I know some formula and some algorithm that this isn't even possible. But do you just like say, okay, well, let's forget about that and let's just imagine anything's possible?
You have to. Yes.
Yeah.
You almost have to, because if you put parameters on something, you'll never succeed, because there's always a reason not to do something.
Right.
There are thousands of reasons not to do it. And so we always think, what are the reasons to do it? Well, we can't do that, because the only way to get this done, you have to, I don't know, be in 0G or something. Well, how do we create 0G? Oh, you can't do that. Well, yeah, we can. Let's figure out, we're about to throw something in the air. And now it's 0G when it's falling. So how do we figure out and do it during that time frame? Whatever. So you figure out ways around those problems that you come up with. This is the way I envision it, which with the help of him.
Absolutely. So you have to start unbounded, and then see if there's a solution that nobody's thought about in the unbounded way, like Brian was talking about. And then you, of course, and now you have to make the product. Now you have to, okay, so we can't have unattainium, right? So let's go with an advanced, carbon graphite matrix that we can get as close as we can, for instance, and stuff like that. But you have to start unbounded for sure, because that's where all the great ideas come from. And the big vision of making things happen. Yeah.
Is the flying car going to be used for, say, public use?
Yes. So the whole concept behind that is, I like to, before I answer that question, if you let me go back to 1830.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine it's 1830. You have never seen a train. There is no trains in the United States in 1830. The very first train was put in from Baltimore Harbor to Ellicott City, only 14 miles.
Wow.
In that day, they spent $2 million, which would be hundreds of millions of dollars, putting that in, buying the train, putting the track, all the right-of-ways and all that. People were laughing at them. But you remember from history, let's fast forward to history. Remember there was like 12 railroad barons that knew the vision. They knew where they were going. So that's 1830. The first train track was put in right here in Maryland. By 1869, we had a railroad that spanned the whole continent of the United States, the Intercontinental Railroad. Now the price of moving goods went down tenfold, and people could move about their lives from city to city 5 times faster than you could with horse and carriage. And think about the cities that had the depots and the cities that didn't have the depots along the train tracks. The cities that had the depots flourished. The other cities, many of them are not even here today, because they had nobody was stopping there.
Right.
And we know in the United States and in the world, transportation is so important. And why'd they start in the Baltimore Harbor? Because you already had roads. You already had shipping. Now you have a train. It's so important to have that. So to answer your question, it's going to be to use this vehicle, able to use this vehicle. It's public. It's going to be that's probably, and there's been studies that's probably the biggest market. You'll use it like Uber. You'll take your smartphone and your app and say, "Come pick me up here. I want to fly point to point there," and you'll be able to do it 5 times faster. It'll be used commercially. The price of moving goods is going to go down tremendously because of the time to move these things, and these aircrafts are going to be made more prolifically than aircrafts are made nowadays. They'll make thousands of aircraft of these types instead of hundreds that you see in types of aircraft now.
And would they also be like cleaner?
Yes.
For pollution wise.
So we're working on extremely green solutions. Talking about with that like if you're just moving about intra-city, then you can do that 100% electric. Now, you want to move from city to city, it might be a clean hybrid, but once again, that is so much better than what we got now, because you could run your genset at its optimal efficiency. Unlike a car and airplane engine that's changing RPM and stuff like that, with this, you can run it, you can power your motors, power your batteries, power your accessories and stuff like that. So all this is going to help, reduce our carbon footprint, reduce commute times. I mean, a little fact is that in the average person's lifetime, all the commuting that you do, you spend years in the car. Imagine cutting that fivefold for the future generation. And now, you're taking off like a helicopter, flying as fast as an airplane, then landing again. It'll be highly connected. You can be working, or you can just enjoy the view and stuff like that. So go back to the train analogy. It totally changed us in the way we move. This is going to totally change what
It's interesting
what we're doing.
Because I imagine that it won't just affect transportation of people and goods and that sort of thing. There's other industries that are going to develop as a result of this
Exactly.
being something. And it won't. I don't mean just like, okay, well now there's flying car delivery for Amazon and all that.
But
I mean,
we don't know. We don't
Right,
know.
you have
we don't
no
know what
train.
the industry is going to affect. Like going back to the train scenario, when the trains came about, and you had those hubs, that's when the first catalogs came. You had the Sears catalog. That's seriously. Because what happened, the conductors would have, a watch, and someone said, "Man, where'd you get that watch?" Well, I got it in New York. Well, that's 2 days by train this way. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring you a brochure that has everything this Sears and Roebuck says. So they were giving catalogs to people along the railway.
Wow.
And they said, when I come back, I'll bring you 5. Well, how many do you need, Paul? I need 6, so I bring you 6. So that's when the catalog was born. So that whole delivery and that whole industry was brand new at the time. That was the Amazon at the time. It was. So we don't know what it's going to affect. I mean, it's going to be revolutionary. I mean, right now it's 2021. I'll give you an example. When I was active duty, and I was at a meeting at I think I was in the Pentagon. Anyway, they were talking about drones back in 2000. Must have been 4 or 5. No, it was later because I was. Anyway, it doesn't matter when. But anyway, they said there are going to be no pilots in the Navy by 2045. They gave a number, and I laughed. And I'll never forget, this admiral says, "Commander Jordan, what's so funny?" I said, that's crazy. As an aviator, we got to have pilots. And he said, well, if you'd have said the same thing to General Patton in 1901, people laughed that there were no more horses in the Army by 1945. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, in 1901, there were tons of horses in the Army, U.S. Army. Yeah. But by 1945, there were virtually none.
And it's crazy, too, just like you said, with the railroad 1830 to 1870, essentially, transformed the country. That's not a very long time.
Very short. That's in our lifetime. We're going to see major transportation revolution happen. And like you said, we know some of the things, the accessories that are going to happen, the ecosystem and the infrastructure that has to be set up, and that's going to cause tremendous amount of growth and economic opportunity. And the other thing I like to think about too is if every mile of interstate, this is staggering, and you can check it in Wikipedia, costs $10 to $20 million per mile.
Right.
Imagine not having to spend so much money building roads now, maintaining roads and stuff like that. When you can now vertically separate and fly and get there faster and et cetera.
Wow.
So, what's going to happen? It's anybody's guess. No, remember the first time you saw a smartphone and you're like, why do I need a smartphone?
Why do I need a camera?
Why a camera? But now it has the camera and the GPS and a supercomputer in there, and it has like 5 different types of radios all built in there. You can do so much stuff, things that you never knew you could do. That we're going to start seeing this thing happen from this type of industry that's coming
Jack
up.
Fresco was a futurist. He was a futurist back in.
Jack Fresco?
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, he talked about this very thing, how he talked about your car way back in the day. And it wouldn't surprise me that if you guys don't go to a hybrid, as battery technology improves, you may get to a point where you don't need to have a hybrid. It may be all, battery from here to California.
Absolutely.
But he talked about how roads are going to become obsolete. And someone asked him, well, Jack, what are you going to do with the roads? He said, they're going to be very long parks. And I was like, oh, that would be pretty cool. Like biking trail and parks.
Right on. Well, so I know there's got to be a lot of, I can only imagine that they have to do air traffic control for these new routes and stuff that you're going to be on, and we don't have to get into the nitty gritty of that, but how long do you imagine it will take before that stuff is, whatever needs to be in place, things like that, because it's not just going to be like, hey, we got a car and now we're going to fly it. They're not going to let you do that. So you don't have to, you can explain whatever parts of it you want, but I'm just interested to know really, like, how long do you think it would be before we can start to see things like that in the sky and utilize them?
So there's 3 major components that need to happen. One is, like you talked about, air traffic management. Fortunately, NASA got into this fairly early, and for about 5 years now, they've been looking at how do you sequence and separate and control these, looking in the future where you have hundreds of these flying around the city. But the good news is we have a lot of this technology already built into the aircraft, where they have transponders that send out what's called ADS-B, aircraft-dependent information that tells the airplanes where they are and stuff like that in relationship to each other. And that information can be brought down to a ground station and stuff like that. So that's going to be worked out. That's not I don't think that's a huge showstopper. The FAA is working on how do you certify these vehicles, because an airplane is certified as a whole, and if you certify a propeller, you certify it with an engine or a motor, and all these components are new. You can't just get a standard propeller motor, put it together, an airframe and stuff like that. Everybody's making things that are fairly unique to their vehicles and stuff like that. So they're working with that, and they think that's about 2 years out. We'll see the first certified aircraft, and I think that we'll have time to grow that airspace system, because it's not going to be an explosion of these air vehicles. It's going to be a few at a time. And right now, I'm telling you, right now, as an aviator, as a lifelong aviator, I've been an aviator for nearly 40 years now. I can't hardly believe. Had my license for nearly 40 years. We can fly these things safe today. Yeah, no problem. Safely, following the rules that are there and stuff like that. And then the third major aspect is public acceptance, right?
I was going to ask you about that.
So you can't have if these things were as loud as a turbine helicopter, nobody wants them. they're just too loud.
Right.
You don't want that landing in, because I see that and of course you see the acceptance cycle, the early adopters and stuff like that, and it'll probably in communities, it'll probably start off in the more affluent communities, things like that. But can you imagine if you had a vertiport is what they're calling them. We call them hop stops. A hop stop in near the center of the community, near your park where people can walk to it and stuff like that. It has to be quiet. They have to be safe. Like our vehicle, we have multiple redundant motors, redundant battery packs, a ballistic chute in it, which is a whole aircraft chute, and things like that. So the public has to accept these things that it's not going to disturb them, and they can move about safely.
Do you get a pulse on that? Like when you talk to people, are they like, or are more people? Do you have some general idea of like where people sit on this idea?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I did a I-Core class, and it was a lot about customer discovery. And I interviewed a broad range of people across the spectrum, and of course, a lot of people haven't even heard about it. It's not on their radar. That's why I go back to that analogy. Right. The people that weren't involved with the railroad didn't know it was coming.
Yeah.
Right.
So now you talk to people, explain to them what it is, and especially the millennials and younger, they're like all for. They're like, if I can do that, that's the way I would travel. Because I remember the first time my kids were telling me about, hey, let's just call an Uber. I'm like, what's an Uber? What are we talking about? That stuff. And they're already thinking that way.
Right.
I read something, and it's interesting how the generations change. 20 years ago, something like 80% of the people when they were 16 got their driver's license. Now that 80% is around like 22 years old.
Right.
People don't care to drive so much anymore.
I've never cared to drive.
Yeah,
it's scary. It's just awful. Anyway, sorry. That's another.
So I think we'll start seeing these adopters very much in the young, and that's what my customer discovery said. The young urban professionals are they're gonna latch on this. I'm like, heck yeah! If I can go from my apartment to where I'm working, and it only takes me 3 minutes instead of nearly 30 minutes at rush hour, I'm going to do it. And I don't care if it costs me a little bit more. My time is valuable. And over time, the cost, of course, is going to go down.
Well, especially a place like New York, where it's so congested, and to catch a subway or a cab or an Uber, go 2 miles takes 30 minutes.
Yes.
So if I'm living in, Far Rockaway and I'm working Manhattan, I'd much rather catch a hop flight,
That's right.
Of the, a building. And, it just makes sense.
And here's what's interesting, too, I discovered in this journey talking to potential customers is people don't think about miles. They think about time, right? You go, how long does it take you to get to work? How long does it take to get to grandma's? How long? We think about time. Time is actually really important to us, and we don't bring it to the forethought and think about it. And just think if you could tell a little kid, over your life, you're going to spend 5 times less traveling than me. That's going to be, that's going to in itself is going to allow for more economy. Right. It's going to allow for more time with your family. Right. It's going to change the way we do things. So on the time aspect, so say like personally, I would say I wouldn't want to live more than 45 minutes from where I work. That'd be my limit. It gets painful after 45. I'd love to, if it was 30 minutes or less, that'd be ideal, right? So if you're thinking about time, and now you can fly one of these air vehicles that goes 200 miles an hour. If you live 30 minutes, now I can live 100 miles away.
Right.
I might be wore out just from screaming the whole time.
Yeah. I can buy a farm. I can live somewhere else. I think so. What else is going to happen is this is going to change, and we saw this with COVID, right? With more people being able to, hey, I can telecommute, so I'm going to go buy or live in my my resort place that I normally only go to 2 weeks in the summer and live out there. But I think that's going to happen. People are going to go, as we get back from COVID, we realize, come on, we know you can't do everything telecommuting. You need to have a lot of people there, especially if you're manufacturing something and things like that. But now you can push away from the cities. You can buy land that's less expensive. You can buy a house that's better and less expensive than you can buy that flat in New York City, right? That you're paying, $5,000 a month for 4 walls that you can fit in and stuff like that. So a lot of changes ahead, I think.
Oh yeah,
it's interesting. This is one of the things that I enjoy and find interesting about doing this show is that, well, when I first came here, I left Manhattan, pursuing music up there and touring a lot and yada yada yada, and I came here and had this sort of perception that art is hard. Doing music is tough because you have to go through all these things. Like you're trying to do something, especially like I'm trying to do something different. I don't just want to play in somebody's group that's playing and lots of people are already showing up because they know what they're playing and it's just like this, and the record label put a category on it and now they know how to market it. And if you're trying to not do that in music, it's impossible because you can't get the avenues and you can't get the venues and you can't get the support. And I thought that was something specific to music and art. And then I came here and I see people who are inventing things. So Marilyn Loves You invents a hot box, and Jordan R&D's doing all these, the boat case, the prosthetics, like everything that you guys are doing, and flying cars. And I hear the stories about the hurdles. Or maybe you're not, what you're describing isn't necessarily even hurdles. It's just like the public perception, the venues, the rules and everything. And as Paul and I sort of go down this road of trying to develop this sound, which is different, it's all the same stuff.
The struggle is real, right?
It's amazing.
Anytime people don't know and you're trying to convince them of something they've never heard of, never seen, never witnessed or experienced, that's a hurdle. To convince them of something new. And that's always been the case.
It's weird too because like I have my perception, and then I get like confused on, just like kind of like I don't ever really think somebody else is being deceitful because I myself am not really deceitful. So I don't even really consider it as an option. And sort of the same thing happens to me with new ideas and creativity. Like I want to see that from anybody doing whatever they're doing, new ideas, creative ideas, imagination. Like I get excited about it. I want to check that out. I want to support that and patronize that, whatever. And I just assume that other people are the same way. Like, look, this is new and different. Aren't you excited about it? No, I don't know what that. I don't know about that. And
it's just fly to work.
Yeah. So it's interesting to hear all of you, all the people that come on the show and speak about those things in the avenue that they're in, like the flying car. So
creation's creation, doesn't matter what it is, music, flying cars or dance or what have you. It's all about creating something new.
Right.
I'm with you, and I think that especially when like you talked about that small comment that you made earlier about the inside of yourself, where it comes from inside of yourself, and if you get into studying yogic teachings and Native American teachings, a lot of that stuff talks about the truth that's inside of you and extrapolating that potential without you don't have to cross-reference this and that. There's stuff that will come from your uniqueness and make a contribution. And that's sort of what Paul and Cecil Taylor and Larry Willis and Jere Carroll have all taught me, is that this is an important path to share what's inside of you and what's inside of you and what's inside of you. And it really blows my mind sometimes when you do come across those people. Like I said, I just assume that everybody gets excited about that stuff. And I guess sometimes I'm remiss to find that there's a portion of people who don't care at all about that.
But we did just share a really big day, Mother's Day,
That's right.
because that's where most of us came from.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where the future is going to come from as well.
Indeed.
Can you
We're
describe how
already flying.
you guys find your inspiration for music? Or is it just a spark and it's hard to articulate?
No, I find my inspiration actually from outside myself. And then the only way I could actually describe it would be from the universe. And then through me, I put that into the music that I'm playing and into the people that I'm interacting with while playing, trying to make something not only different, but something a little beyond where the music has been.
I'm going the same path. Like when I think about how the universe works, and for instance, like what time is, and in music, or in our everyday lives, we have a sense and a concept of time that moves in evenly spaced, ticking off the grid, and you can measure it that way pretty consistently. But time itself is a spectrum that's fluid all the way through. There's no
Right.
ticking it off like that. But so much of what we do, and I'll just go straight to music, forget about everything else. The way that manifests in music is very repetitious pulsing in all the music. And now that might be good for people to be able to easily get in sync with each other and shake their butts together. And maybe even feel positive together, and that's great. But that is not the only possibility of time. So,
But it's also been used for teaching.
sure,
I mean, that's basically why
but that's
they printed all of the
that may
books
be
they printed.
what it's doing is coming out as maybe it's being used to teach. But what ends up happening is that pretty much 90-something% of the music that you hear has a repetitious pulse. And we have much more attuned sensory receptors that can perceive much more subtle inflections and differences. And that's not just in time, that's in harmony and melody and form. And so I look to the universe and the concept and an exciting, interesting thing about infinity and how there are infinite possibilities, and that encompasses those things. So.
And that's what Rob was talking about.
Exactly, with the birds. And
I
the
mean,
stars.
that's what he started with, I believe, because it's like the written and the time and the teaching of it, that all was generated, and then a corporation produced a certain sound that many people liked and many people bought and are still buying. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they developed much in the form of music itself.
Right.
It's really interesting how you guys talk about the bird. How earlier shows you talked about how early humans saw the bird and it made the sounds, and we tried to mimic and it turned to music. Then you got people like Rob saw the bird and they want to try to fly. So how nature inspired us, different things in us, but ultimately the same thing, all through creation of something that we saw. Anyway,
No,
where I was going with that. But
I think that's
is interesting.
perfect place to be with it. It's true. Those things inform and inspire.
Right.
So,
but they inspire everyone differently. How
Right.
like we always talk about, my wife and I always talk about how we're points of we're points of consciousness on the supreme consciousness, on God. We're all points of consciousness in Him, and how we interpret things is how we see things differently. We both saw the same thing. We saw the bird, but how we interpret it and how we use that information is different for each of us. For him, it's how do we fly like the bird? With you, it's how do we make sounds like the bird? You know, but it's ultimately it's how we envision it.
And all those points, those different points of consciousness on the supreme consciousness need to be connected in order to perceive.
We are connected,
more or more encompassing or I don't even know more, or I don't have the right words for it.
An experience. We're all points of consciousness looking for an experience.
And the greater experience of being together in harmony and sharing it and that connection, I think, is important.
And that's really important too. People like yourselves, you know, how we all connect, and how, like you said, when you see something new, you get excited.
Yeah.
You know, so it tells me that, you know, you guys are always connected. You know, when I found out he was working on Hop Flight, I was like, wow, that's phenomenal. We were talking about it years ago, like we were both like 03s, you know, and I was like, man, this is really cool. I can't wait to see this. Awesome. You know, then I met you, and you're like, man, I'm making new music. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome.
Right.
At the TED Talk, you know, and so I get excited when I hear new things and it's just fascinating and exciting for me.
I'm always looking to the much to the chagrin of my girlfriend as I watch many subpar YouTube videos, just looking for something cool. But anyway, it's that time, and it's been awesome. So we're gonna have to do it again. And dig more into this idea. I want to hear more about. I think about creative processes too, and what that means for people, and how to go about extrapolating it, especially for people that say they don't have it and that sort of thing. So we would think about it as a practice and a craft, which improves as you practice it. So, I'd love to hear more about that, and I look forward to doing that and seeing some flying cars.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching every week. Check it out, progressculture.org, sonic-spirits.com. All these videos and musical performances and stuff are on YouTube and on those websites. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you all so much for being with us. We appreciate you sharing your time and consideration. Please feel free to reach out to Sonic Spirits and Progress Culture at sonic-spirits.com and progressculture.org. You can also connect with us through our sponsors at techportsomd.org and somdlovesyou.org. We'd love to hear from you if you're working on something awesome, or you have ideas for future shows, or you just like to say hello. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Much love, and see you soon.
Thank you.